For a heating and air conditioning weather center, a cool day ahead. We'll have sunshine and clouds, high 51, and a low of 38, and clouds overnight. Currently, sunshine, 34 degrees. Next news at 7. Breaking news as it happens. Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan and Amy continues next on AM 560, The Answer.
This hourly segment is brought to you by Papa Nicholas Coffee. Papa Nicholas Coffee, a family tradition since 1897.
Only the biggest stories, only the biggest guests, and only the biggest opinions. This is AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. Mitch McConnell took to the Senate floor yesterday to make the case for unanimous consent to move $250 billion more into the Payroll Protection Act, the forgivable loan program for businesses with fewer than 500 employees, which is where about 83% of Americans are employed, those sorts of enterprises. And that was blocked by Democrats because they want to take this opportunity to get more money for states and localities, to get more money for hospitals, to mint up a couple of $1 trillion coins, if you want to follow Rashida Tlaib's wonderful proposal.
Ridiculous. I mean,
people,
who are these people?
It's too. Rashida Tlaib's proposal, if people didn't hear it yesterday, $2,000 debit cards, $2,000 on a debit card for every person in America for more than 3 months, including people here illegally. And then $1,000 a month after that. Then she yangs it after that, $1,000 a month for a year after the crisis ends. And the way you pay for it is have the U.S. mint up two $1 trillion coins and then pay for them at face value. Oh, sure. Well, I'll tell you what. If it's that easy, why don't we have them print up 24 of those $1 trillion coins, and then we can eliminate the U.S. debt. In fact, we could have them print up 110 of those $1 trillion coins and then eliminate the U.S. debt and all of the federal government's unfunded liabilities. I mean, it's just that easy to turn into Zimbabwe, if you would like to. Good light. So Mitch McConnell had this to say about his colleagues on the other side of the aisle.
I want to add more money to the only part of our bipartisan bill that is currently at risk of running out of money. So I was surprised to see this simple proposal met uneasily by the Democratic leadership. The distinguished Democratic leader and the Speaker of the House sought to use this crucial program to open broader negotiations on other topics, including parts of the CARES Act where literally, listen to this, Mr. President, literally no money's gone out the door yet. No money has gone out the door yet. The Democratic leadership has suggested they may hold Americans' paychecks hostage unless we pass another sweeping bill that spends $500 billion doubling down on a number of parts of the CARES Act, including parts that have not even started to work yet. The country cannot afford unnecessary wrangling or political maneuvering. Treating this as a normal kind of partisan negotiation could literally cost Americans their jobs.
But Democrats have bigger matters to attend to. James Carville helped us with this insight that he gave that paragon of integrity, Brian Williamson, MSNBC.
But I think he's in a commanding position. What we got to be careful about is mucking around with his voting, and they're going to try it because Trump, everybody, all the Republicans admitted we can't win if everybody votes. And so my kind of mission here in the short term is to sound the alarm, to say Mitch McConnell and the Supreme Court, they're going to do everything they can to hold on to power. And Speaker Pelosi and Leader Schumer, we got to dig in and make sure these states have funding to conduct these elections and to put pressure on to make sure they're done fairly. This thing in Wisconsin was one of the most awful things I've ever seen in my life. It'll just go you the extent that what they will go to hold on to power. And it was all about one Supreme Court seat in Wisconsin. They will kill people to stay in power, literally.
Republicans will kill people to stay in power. Mitch McConnell is talking about your jobs, and James Carville is talking about state and local administration of elections. Okay. Salena Zito joins us. She's Washington Examiner reporter, New York Post columnist, CNN contributor. And author of the bestseller, The Great Revolt, Inside the Populist Coalition, Reshaping American Politics. Salena, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Mhm. Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Morning.
It's snowing here in Pittsburgh.
Is it?
Oh,
Oh, my God. That's no good. That's no
good
good.
idea to stay inside then.
Yeah, it's good. Sounds like it's good Steelers weather. If only the Steelers were ever going to play again. Who knows? Salena, talk to us about what's happening on the Hill. Your perspective on that from sort of the reporter for the Every Man and Every Woman out in the hustings. You're already north of $100 billion that has been dispersed through the program that had an initial $350 billion in funding. We've seen the unemployment filings over the last 3 weeks. It seems like there's legitimate concern that this fund will run out of its first allocation and is going to need more if we're going to stay closed for another even 3 weeks.
Well, I think that people are taking a look at this. If people that are even looking at this, I will tell you, in my traveling, and I haven't stopped traveling all over the country, people have really stepped away from watching daily politics. Now, that does not mean they stepped away from watching the president's daily press conference, but these kinds of political I'm not even sure what word I use. Hijinks. They're not. I think this virus has sort of made people say, "That's it, I'm done. These people are crazy." But what happened yesterday wasn't a good moment for the Democrats, in that this was a pretty easy bill to just vote. Just everyone just sort of jump on. It was clean, and it continued the funding. And the Democrats made it, again, about putting, things in it, and, and their little Happy Meals. That's what I always call them, when they put their little prizes in it. And I don't think that the American people at this moment really have the patience for that. They just want what they think maybe they don't need, but they think their neighbor needs, or the people that they see on television, or their cousins 3 states away, and they don't want the typical politics that you, of course, saw yesterday.
I wanted to get your sense of the media coverage of this, too. There was an interesting piece at Real Clear Media by a fellow at the George Washington University Center for Cyber and Homeland Security. And he looked at what the numbers show, looking at media coverage through search results and so forth, both in January and then when everybody supposedly knew, according to Joe Scarborough.
Right.
But then also, just generally speaking, how it's been covered. And what he finds is that in January, it wasn't just impeachment. What the media was most covering was the Democrat primary for the presidential nomination, right? And then since that time, they have cast the pandemic as a political and economic issue rather than a health issue. Everything is forced through the funnel of politics.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got 2 things going on here during this pandemic. A lot of smaller newspapers where there's still trust in information have continued the collapse only more rapidly. Again, that where a lot of people are then forced into getting their information from larger news organizations, which aren't located where they live and don't share their values. And then you have the larger news organizations then leading the information with partisan politics and with a heavier hand in some more support of democratic ideals. And I mean that with a big D. And so what does that mean? So all we talked about in January, as you said, was impeachment, or who's going to be the nominee. Will Elizabeth drop out? Will Pete stay in? Will Joe survive? Those kinds of stories. Oh, wait, the president closed the border with China? Oh, he's a racist. Those were the three things that kept circling the news narrative every evening. And so you fast forward to today, and it doesn't matter what the president says. Whether you like him or not, it's pretty obvious to see he can't cut a break with my profession. This is a president in my lifetime, and I've been around for a long time, who's never enjoyed not even that sort of honeymoon period that presidents typically get in the first couple months of their presidency. I mean, they were talking about impeaching him before he was even inaugurated.
19 minutes after he was inaugurated.
So,
Salena, how do you feel that he's doing right now? How do you think President Trump is handling this pandemic?
I think that despite people in my profession not liking the daily news brief, I think it's been really good for him. Why has it been really good for him? Because it's been really good for people to get information. They don't get that deep length of information from their local news, mainly because they don't just have that time to put that much information in a half-hour segment, and they don't get that from cable news because most of the shows are opinion pieces, and they kind of like having not just him, but also to having Pence and having the experts on to answer questions, and they feel as though they're informed.
Yeah, it's interesting because the Wall Street Journal opined about the briefings, and then, of course, Trump opined about the Wall Street Journal opining. But they sort of take a high-handed approach, and it's sort of the general criticism of Trump, which I largely share, is some of the tangents that are a bit tone deaf and unnecessary, some of the punching down that's unnecessary. But by and large, I think you're right. You get so little long-form interaction with your political leaders and policymakers in a transparent way in real time that's not filtered. I think they're generally incredibly valuable, and it lays bare who President Trump is in many respects, as well as those around him, and who the D.C. press corps is. And I'll tell you what, for as much as people are saying, oh, I don't know if they're helping him and this and that, and the political consultant class on the Republican side, I'm talking about, which are who always have, who always are about to soil themselves and anything that's not sort of conventional. I think there is a real value add there, and I think consistent with the value proposition of draining the swamp. This is stripping the veneer off the whole thing. And so you get the good, the bad, and the sometimes weird of Trump and the press corps. And I'll tell you what, Rachel Maddow wouldn't be suggesting that news networks stop covering those briefing sessions if they weren't effective.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And see, one of the things that I have always found interesting about President Trump or candidate Trump, he has always been willing to make that risk to let his good and bad side show, because he understood that it was blunt, but also it was revealing about not just his rivals, but also in about my profession. And it is something that my profession, he's always believed was at the worst corrupt, at the least very biased. And so he has been willing to put himself out there like I said, not only to get the information out, but for you to see everyone as they are, not just him.
And we talked to you a couple weeks back, and you gave us your assessment, since you travel around the country so much talking to, actual human beings as opposed to politicians. That people weren't blaming anybody for the virus. They're just like trying to figure out how to cope with it, what the implications are going to be, what's next around the corner. A few weeks later, where are you getting the sense that ordinary working Americans are?
Well, most people, I've been to 7 states during this pandemic. And I find that most people on Trump have been consistent. Even if they don't like him, they still watch this daily briefing. But I have also found people that didn't like him that have now turned towards him because they have found value in his bluntness, even if he sometimes says things that they're like, oh dear God. But the people that have supported him before this, I haven't seen any movement of them at all away from him. And I have, and I think I mentioned this before. One thing I have noticed consistently too among people on both sides of the aisle is we all kept wondering, and we've said this on the show several times, are people ever just going to have enough of politics in Washington? Yeah, well, I think we've hit that point. People really, really are incredibly disgusted with Washington, and they feel as though that this parlor game that they play all the time has run its course, and they're just tired of it. And even more importantly, they're tired of the way that Washington press sort of directs it, like a director, like a show. And I find that fascinating.
She is Salena Zito, Washington Examiner reporter, New York Post columnist, CNN contributor, author of the bestseller, The Great Revolt, Inside the Populist Coalition, Reshaping American Politics. Salena, thanks for joining us as always. Appreciate it.
Thank you. I hope everyone has a happy Easter.
You too.
Yep. Thanks, Salena. And she joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Connect with Dan and Amy using the AM560 mobile app. Download it today at 560theanswer.com/mobile.
The Lou Dobbs Financial Report is brought to you by Signature Bank, helping local businesses succeed. Visit signaturebank.bank for your commercial banking needs.
I'm Lou Dobbs. Volkswagen announces furloughs at its Tennessee plant, Smithfield Foods closing a facility in South Dakota, and COVID-19 sets back air travel by decades. Those stories next.
The coronavirus is wreaking havoc here in the United States and across the globe. The stock market is plummeting. Sports leagues are suspending their seasons. Schools are sending students home, and the entire U.S. economy has been destabilized. Many experts say this is just the beginning. This is a devastating risk if you're heavy in stocks with no safeguard. Wise investors know to hedge against stock market collapse by utilizing physical precious metals. Noble Gold is a leader in this conservative financial strategy, offering extensive education, patient counsel, and expert guidance by phone. Do you want to get your hands on some physical gold and silver?